Chapter 11. Green and Red came out of the theater where their limo idled, fanning up grit from the street-level plasticrete road. The driver touched a control, and the rear door slid up. Green and Red entered the limo and sank into foam cushions whose machineries adjusted to fit them perfectly. "To the tower," Red ordered the driver. The limo lifted slightly and slid away on its cushion of air. "What do you think?" Green asked. "Did people really used to go out to gather and listen to noise like that?" Green laughed. "So the history books say. Rock concerts, as they call them. Actually attending them instead of sitting comfortably in their own living rooms and watching it on the Holovi. What was the point?" "It was for the totality of it. Sight, sound, smells, feelings, a shared experience." Red shook his head. "A wonder we ever got civilized, risking death on the unregulated roadways to listen to that jarring shit. Also a wonder they all weren't deaf." "Hey, times change. We don't wear animal skins and hit each other over the head with clubs anymore either. Speaking of clubs, how is the Intercept going?" "As well as could be expected." "That business with what's-his-name? Massey? No problems there?" Green nodded. "No, it's been resolved." "What exactly happened? I didn't get the full details." Green reached over to the limo's bar and punched in a code. After a moment, the dispenser delivered 2 bulbs of some frothy blue liquid. Green took one, handed the second to Red. "Ah, not bad for a robot bar. You were saying?" "Ah, yes. Well, one of the communications people slipped up. Sent an uncoded file to Massey's residence. Computer didn't catch it. Real snafu. That would have been bad enough, but unfortunately Massey's son accessed the material." "Stupid," Red said, sipping at his drink. "Extremely so. The boy showed it to his mother. Neither of them understood the full implications, of course, but they got enough of it to possibly compromise the mission. Massey was in the shower when the message came through. When he got out, his wife started babbling about what they'd seen." Green squirted more of the froth into his mouth. Massey really had no choice, not if he wanted to maintain security. The boy smiled at his father. Massey returned the smile, reached out and took his son's head gently in his hands. The move was so fast the boy didn't have time to be surprised. A hard twist, the snap of bone, the instant limpness. His wife's eyes widened in horror, but before she could even begin to digest the impact of what she had seen, Massey reached her. A single, practiced move, fast, no suffering. It had to be done, but he had grown fond of them after all. It was the best he could do. They deserved that much. "God, that's cold," Red said. Yes, it was SOP, of course, but they had been married for 6 years. Even as cover, you'd think he'd want somebody else to do the wet work on this one, but he did it himself. The company made sure the investigative team from the local police were friendlies, and Massey's story about coming home to find them dead was accepted. The local law figures it as a robbery gone bad, or a wilding by somebody clever enough to bypass building security. What about the communications tech? Wasn't there something about that? Green finished his bulb, punched up another one, looked at Red with one eyebrow raised. "No, I'm fine." Green said, "Massey took him out, fed the body into an industrial disposal unit that makes fertilizer. Guy's probably helping flowers and vegetables grow in 6 countries by now. Pissed Massey off, I imagine." "Well, that's the strange thing. Not personally. Massey killed him cleanly, no torture or anything, if what I heard is correct. It was just another job to him." "Buddha, that is cold. Guy was responsible for the death of my spouse and kid. I'd want him to twist a little in the breeze before I finished him." "Yeah, but you aren't a sociopath. With Massey, the job is what comes first, last, and always. He doesn't care what he has to do to get it done." Red pretended to shiver. "We got some kind of failsafe on this guy?" "Of course. You don't think we'd let a man like that run around without a control, do you? He's got a cap of C9 circ set into his hypothalamus, along with a beeper. He ever turns on us, Somebody in security only has to get within a click of him and send a coded pulse, and blammo! Massey's head turns into a big bowl full of mushy brain salad. Good, Red said. Guys like him are necessary, but I'll sleep better knowing we can take him out if need be. Not to worry, Green said. It's our job to think of these things. We've got it covered. Massey left the funeral of his wife and son, looking somber but playing a role. He didn't feel anything in particular about the loss. One less woman and child didn't mean anything, and while it was true he'd gotten used to them, he'd get used to them being gone too. That's how it was. Behind him, his control dogged his heels, blending skillfully into the passers-by outside the crematorium. The man was good, but Massey had spotted him months ago. He hadn't let on, of course, because it was better to have the devil you know tailing you than the one you didn't know. Massey wanted to grin, but he kept his face neutral as he caught a walk moving down from the crematorium level toward the elevated P-mover that would take him home. The company thought it was real clever, injecting a bioexplosive into his system during a routine physical. Massey had more money than he knew what to do with, and with enough credits, you could get a very good doctor. The C9 had been easy enough to remove. The pinhead-sized capsule had also been easy to load into a high-pressure injector gun. When Massey had taken his vacation to the Amazon Preserve a few weeks ago, they'd followed him, of course. The preserve was almost 20 square kilometers of authentic rainforest, bounded by high containment fields that kept the animals in and civilization out. Local wildlife included such pests as insects, some of which liked to bite. Massey's control had lost his insect repellent, or so he'd thought, and when the mosquitoes began eating at him, one of them had bitten him particularly hard. He'd slapped his hand over the wound but missed the flying bug, because that particular bite wasn't from an insect at all. And now that deadly C9 capsule was lodged in the control's brain. The day he sent a coded pulse to kill Massey would be most surprising, and, Massey thought, particularly fitting. He'd kept the locator they'd put in, slightly altered. He didn't give a damn if they knew where he was for now. When he decided he didn't want them to know anymore, the beeper would stop sending a signal as quickly as he could touch a button on his belt. The doctor who'd performed the surgery was now part of a batch of steel forming a bridge suspension on Mars, if Massey's information was correct. No loose ends to tangle things. As long as they let him do his job, Massey wouldn't have any problems with the company. But if they somehow lost faith, well, there was no point in being unprepared. Mistakes happened, even though he didn't make them. Always better to be ready than not. The job this time was a big one, worth a lot of credits. For him, the money was just a way to keep score. So far, Massey was winning big. There wasn't anybody else close. The company thought it was clever, but they didn't belong in the same class with him. He was the best. He intended to keep on being the best for a long, long time. While Wilkes was only a sergeant, and theoretically subject to command by any officer of line rank, the truth of it was that on this mission, only Stevens was going to be giving him orders. They wanted him on this ship, and so they'd bent over and handed him the soap. Wilkes figured he might as well use it. The first thing he did was program the ship's computer with a personal override, using the last bit of the favor he was owed. He would come and go pretty much as he wanted. Getting Billy on the ship was easier than getting her out of the medical center. When Wilkes accompanied two of the spare hypersleep chambers into the loading bay, Billy was inside one of them, the lid opaqued. Nobody even bothered to question him. He waltzed past the trooper leaning against the door with nothing more than a few words. "Hey, Sarge," the man said. "You cutting it kind of thin, ain't you? It's only 5 minutes to log on deadline." "Live fast, die young," he began. "And leave a good-looking corpse," the trooper finished. He laughed. Wilkes shook his head. A lot of civilians believed that colonial marines were all steely-eyed, boot-tough, deadly as a box full of Arcturian wasps, and as sharp as a room full of needles. The entertainment vids made it out that little, if anything, got past a trained marine, that they could chew up nails and pee thumbtacks. The truth was that a basic trooper was usually a kid, barely old enough to be depilating his peach fuzz whiskers, and as big a sucker as any teenager. It didn't take a genius to pass basic military entrance exams. If you could find your way to the test site and spell your name for the computer, you were probably bright enough to get in. How long you stayed alive after that depended on how well the training took and how stupid your officers were, but the myth of the take charge Marines was just that, a myth. Wilkes walked the chambers past the trooper, floating them easily on their humming repulsors. Nobody expected anybody to smuggle a person onto a military ship leaving Earth. Coming back, maybe. A lot of folks wanted to get home out in the frontier worlds, but few people wanted to go bad enough to sneak into an outboard ship. Stevens would shit a square brick when he found out, but by then it would be too late. You weren't going to turn a starhopper around and make a 50-light-year run back to Earth to drop off a stowaway. And on this mission, you weren't going to take any side trips along the way either. Hell, they were going to be gone more than a year in real time. Exactly how long was classified. Time they got back, all kinds of things could have changed. Wilkes shrugged. Stevens was an idiot. A desk writer. No field experience at all, much less in combat. He must have pulled in some chits to get this assignment, and he didn't have the least idea of how dangerous it was. Jerking the plasma weapons was his first stupid mistake. He just wanted to show Wilkes who was in command. Well, he'd live to regret it. Probably they'd all live to regret it. Wilkes jockeyed the chambers into the sleep compartment. He touched a button and the lid on Billy's fanned up. Okay, kid. Here's what's happening. We're going to the monster's planet. You and I, we know how these things are, but nobody believes us. Probably we won't be coming back. Her face went white. I can still offload you. You want? A long moment hung suspended between them. Finally, she shook her head. I've lived with them most of my life, she said. Might as well face them and get it over with, one way or another. He nodded. That's about how I see it. All right. I'm going to run the lines into this unit and put you to sleep. See you on the other end. Yeah. He started to close the lid. Hey, Wilkes? Yeah? Thanks for coming to get me. He shrugged. We got something in common, kid. We both should have died on Rim. She nodded. Yes, I know. Maybe we can kick some bug ass before we go. She nodded again. I'll keep that thought. I hope you don't dream, kid. You too. He shut the unit and moved it into place. It only took a few seconds to attach the cryo lines and power supply. He triggered the unit and set the timer. Sleep well, kid. With that, Wilkes turned and walked away.